In 1960, an American archaeologist was digging in a cave in northern Iraq when he found something that should not have been there. Pollen, not random pollen, concentrated clusters of it, 7 different species of wild flowers, arranged on top of a body that had been buried in that cave 60,000 years ago. The body was not human. It was a Neanderthal. And somebody not even of our species, had picked flowers from a hillside and laid them on him. This discovery would quietly destroy almost everything we thought we knew about death, about grief, and about what it means to be human. Because what it proved is something most people alive today have never been told. For 99% of human history, we did not do what we do now with our dead. We did something else. And in the last 100 years, we became the first civilization in the entire history of our species to forget how. This is the story of what we lost. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why a Neanderthal 60,000 years ago knew something about grief that you do not. Today, when someone you love dies, you will probably never see their body. They will die in a hospital. They will be moved by people you don't know to a building you've never been inside. By the time you see them again, if you see them again at all, they will look like a wax version of themselves, prepared by a stranger. In 1900, 80% of Americans died at home, surrounded by family washed by their relatives. By 1980, 80% of Americans died in hospitals, surrounded by strangers, touched only by professionals. In 80 years, we erased a ritual that had existed for 300,000. How did this happen? Hold on to that question. We'll come back to it. First, you need to understand what was there before. The earliest deliberate human burial we have found is roughly 100,000 years old. It was discovered in Ralph Cave in Israel. A young Homo sapiens, placed carefully on his side, with deer antlers laid across his chest. But here's what nobody tells you. Burial wasn't invented by us. It wasn't invented by Homo sapiens at all. Neanderthals, a species that went extinct 40,000 years ago, were burying their dead before we were. In 1908, in southern France, archaeologists excavating a cave called La Chapelle aux Saints uncovered the skeleton of an old Neanderthal man. He had been placed carefully in a shallow grave. His body had been arranged. The soil around him had been prepared. He was buried by people who cared that he was gone. That was 50,000 years ago, before our species had figured out how to bake bread, before we had built a single permanent structure. Remember the cave from the beginning of this video? It's called Shanidar, deep in the Zagros Mountains. And in 1960, archaeologist Ralph Solecki found 9 Neanderthal skeletons inside it. One of them, labeled Shanidar Fore, was different. The body had been placed deliberately in a small pit. Solecki sent soil samples from around the body to a French palynologist named Arlette Leroy-Gourhan. What she found broke the assumption that compassion belonged to us alone. Pollen, concentrated, from 7 different species of wild flowers: yarrow, cornflower, bachelor's button, grape hyacinth, hollyhock, many of them with medicinal properties still recognized today, all of them flowering in late spring. 60,000 years ago, in a cave in Iraq, somebody walked up a hillside, picked flowers, came back, and laid them on the body of a man they had loved. They were not us, but they grieved. Compassion is older than our species. Ritual is older than our species. The simple act of stopping, of refusing to walk away from a body, of choosing to mark it with something beautiful, that act predates everything we call human civilization. And once that door opened, it never closed. For tens of thousands of years afterward, what humans did with their dead expanded in every direction the imagination could go. In the steppes of central Russia, around 34,000 years ago, a group buried 2 children at a site we now call Sungir. Their bodies were covered in over 10,000 carved ivory beads. Each bead would have taken roughly an hour to make. In ancient Egypt, the wealthy were preserved across decades, their organs sealed in jars, their bodies wrapped to remain recognizable in the afterlife. But the first Egyptian mummies were not pharaohs. They were ordinary people, buried in the sand and preserved by the desert by accident. Mummification began as an act of God. The Egyptians spent 3,000 years trying to imitate it. In Tibet, a different ritual emerged. The body was carried to a high stone platform and left exposed to the sky. Vultures came. They consumed the body completely. To the people who practiced this, it was not horror. It was the final act of generosity, a body that had been given for a lifetime, now given back. And in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, something even more intimate. The Fore people, when a relative died, prepared and ate the body. The brain, in particular, was reserved for women and children. It was an act of love. The dead, they believed, lived on inside the living. This practice ended in the 1950s, when a neurologist named Carlton Gajusek traced an epidemic of a fatal brain disease, Kuru, to the consumption of infected tissue. He won the Nobel Prize for the discovery. The Fore stopped eating their dead. The disease vanished within a generation. Now here's what's strange about all of this. It's not how different these practices were. It's how universal the underlying impulse was. Across every continent, across every era, across every kind of human society, people did something with their dead. They washed them. They sat with them. They sang to them. They gave them objects. They marked the ground. They returned the body to the earth, to the sky, or to themselves. The dead were not removed. They were transformed. And then, in the span of about 100 years, all of it stopped. The change began in the United States during the Civil War, in the 1860s. Soldiers were dying far from home, in fields hundreds of miles from their families. For the first time in human history, there was a logistical problem at scale. How do you return a body to people who can't come to it? A practice called embalming, developed by a handful of doctors during the war, made it possible to preserve a corpse long enough to ship it home. What began as a wartime necessity became, within 50 years, an industry. By 1900, embalming was standard. By 1920, the funeral parlor had replaced the family home. The body was no longer washed by relatives. It was no longer kept in the front room overnight. It was taken away, prepared by strangers, and returned in a sealed casket for a brief, choreographed ceremony. In 1963, a journalist named Jessica Mitford published a book called The American Way of Death. She documented what had happened. We had built an entire industry, she wrote, designed to keep us from ever having to look at our own dead. The funeral home, the embalmed body, the closed casket, the hospital corridor, all of them were elaborate mechanisms designed to spare the living from the sight of death. We thought we were being kind to ourselves. For 300,000 years, every single human who lived to adulthood had seen the dead. They had touched them. They had carried them. They had been in the same room with a body and learned, slowly, over hours and days, that the person was gone. The grief had a place to go. There was something to do with the hands. Now, there is nothing. You will, in your lifetime, lose people you love. And in almost every case, you will not see them die. You will not wash their body. You will not sit with them through the night. You will receive a phone call. You will receive a sealed casket. You will receive a folded flag, if you are lucky, and a brief ceremony in a room that smells faintly of carpet cleaner. And then, everyone will tell you to move on. This is new. This is not how humans have ever done this before. Researchers studying modern grief have begun to notice something. The cultures that still keep their dead, Mexico's Dia de los Muertos, Indonesia's Toraja people who live with their mummified relatives for months before burial, the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva for 7 days, the Irish wake appear to show different patterns of grief than the cultures that do not. The communities that look at their dead, that sit with them, that touch them, recover differently than the ones that do not. We didn't just outsource death. We took away the one thing every human ancestor for 10,000 generations had access to, the chance to say goodbye in person. 60,000 years ago, a Neanderthal walked up a hillside in what is now Iraq, picked 7 kinds of flowers, and laid them on a man he had loved. We can't manage to be in the same room when our parents die. The grave with the 7 flowers is still there. The wake in the front room is gone. The hands that wash the body are gone. What remains is a hospital corridor, a phone call, and a closed door. For 300,000 years, we knew what to do with the dead. We forgot in 100 years. And the strangest part is this: the bodies of those Neanderthals are still being studied today. New ones are still being discovered in that same cave in Iraq, as recently as 2018. Each one reveals something else, something that suggests they were even more like us than we thought. In the next video, we'll look at what those new discoveries are showing and at one finding from 2020 that may rewrite everything we thought we knew about who, exactly, our ancestors really were. For 300,000 years, we knew what to do with the dead. We forgot in 100 years.